Welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking all about the coronavirus and how it is impacting the airline industry. What I'm hoping to get out of today is we'll go through a large range of the impacts, because it is a very complex issue. We're also going to have a quick look and see what's being said on social media about the topic, which is really exciting because there's a lot of talk about it at the moment. And then finally, we will end up with some recommendations and advice on how you can take advantage or at least make the best out of this terrible situation. So my background, my name is Robin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AFDigital. My background is really a kind of a business analyst background. I was also a bit of a project manager. I worked in the telco space a lot. And I'm really all about the future, business transformation, and a little bit of skateboarding, although I don't skateboard that much anymore. If you want to follow me, Robin_AFD on social. So AFDigital, just for a bit of background, it's a gold consulting partner of Salesforce. We're also a Salesforce.org registered partner, and we're really a multi-cloud partner across sales, service, marketing, community, and a few others. We're really here to provide advisory, architecture, transformation projects, and also we've got a managed service program called Team X, which is a hybrid between marketing and technology. So it's kind of the service of the future. We're also on the Salesforce Partner Advisory Board for Marketing Cloud. This is a real honor. We meet once a year in the US, and we're on the board with 11 other partners, and those are big partners like Deloitte, Accenture, Publicis. So this is a real honor. And I guess kind of why we're talking about this is we've got a lot of cross-industry experience, but if you look in the top left, this is actually our biggest vertical: travel, events, and hospitality. So we've worked with a lot of airlines, a lot of airports, a lot of like group travel companies, all sorts of hospitality, travel, tourism related businesses. So we've had a very long history with this, and for us, we have been affected by the corona virus because of our customers. They've all been impacted, and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, but it is what it is. So I think this is why we're really here today, is to kind of give our point of view on the industry and what we think needs to be done. Great. So let's go through the industry impact first. I'm going to summarize it into challenges. We've got a kind of recommendation for a tactical response, and then some advice around how to thrive in this terrible time. And I'll leave some time for questions at the end. So this is exactly a slide I used to share in my presentations about 2 months ago to my clients. I'm like, yes, the travel industry is on the rise. 42.3 billion in revenue. That's the contribution to Australia's GDP. It's massive as an industry. And this was a blue one before. The other ones are also awesome, and that's still kind of relevant actually, which is an interesting thing to take away to start is travelers are more informed. They're still going to be more informed, and they're going to have better choices. This is never going to be truer than now. Personalized journeys is the new norm. So maybe they won't be searching for today or tonight, but certainly they will have very specific search criteria. So I think there's still a future here in this industry, but right now global travel is not on the rise. So that's why I've made it red and struck it out. When you look at the industry as a whole, it kind of evolves around tourism. It's really around this, well, not tourism only, it's around travel. So you've got these people in the middle, and then around them is an ecosystem of different types of businesses and organizations that provide support to that traveler. So, and that's the thing is, while today we're really going to focus on airlines, I would be remiss in ignoring all of the other related stakeholders in this ecosystem. So we are going to touch across the wider ecosystem. We're actually going to have a deep look into how the cash flows around this ecosystem as well, if you bear with me. So this was a very interesting image that I found end of March 2019. These were the flights, end of March 2020. So still a lot of activity in North America and Asia, but a lot less out of Europe, you can see. And even if you look down like Australia, New Zealand's cut off on this one. Australia is, yes, it's very different to how it was, sparse even. And even since then, that was end of March, I think that has continued to decline dramatically even from then. This is a graph showing the base global capacity, and with the airline industry, it goes through typical trends, you know, like there is an annual seasonal trend and it depends on the hemisphere. All sorts of different systems are at play that make this a very finely balanced, margin thin industry. And what we're seeing now is that, you know, since 27th of January, there's just been an adjusted capacity, and, you know, it kind of got adjusted and then stalled, and then 16th of March, it's taken another dip. If you listen to my social media listening webinars, we always see that March 13th was actually the peak of the social media crisis. That was the highest point in the crisis. So that's quite interesting, that trails. It's also very country specific, and every country has a very different approach to how the flight capacities are impacted, because naturally the airlines want to keep operating as much as they can. They need to. So it's often limited by governments that suspend or put restrictions in place. You can see on the right, these are typical measures taken by countries. So a nation, a government will suspend flights from specific countries. So Italy's a hotspot, no one from Italy is allowed in. That's one of the measures that they typically take. Returning citizens must enter through specific airports is another one, really cutting that down and managing it. Mandatory screening, that's a given. 14-day quarantine. So this is something that's really starting to make the travel hard, and it's making it more of an exception than you know, a norm. Like you wouldn't do a 14-day quarantine to go on holiday, but you would do to get home to your family. So that's really, it's really a last measure. And then complete closure of borders is there as well as a measure, which we're seeing many countries are doing, many countries. You've got here, and I don't know the reason behind this, but this really like pokes itself out, as India not being very impacted until really recently with their flights. So that's very interesting, and I don't know how that will impact their down tail or whatever you'd call happens after this, but in terms of, yeah, don't know. You've got Singapore, you see here, kind of took early measures. Hong Kong also took early measures back in February. UK, 9th of March. A lot of countries, UK, Italy really ramped up 9th of March. It's quite late for Italy, I would have thought. Germany also 9th of March. Spain, really 23rd of March. So yeah, it's very interesting to see how every country is reacting. And as such, if you can imagine an airline that has a lot of flights to different places, they turn one of them off as one country shuts down, and then another, and then rapidly, just the number of flights slow down, number of travelers stop. And then it's bit by bit, you know, these airlines are now doing bits and pieces travel, you know, so they are still active, but it's really for mercy flights, for cargo, for those kind of things. If we look at SARS, and SARS is it's like a mini test on what a big coronavirus may look like. And if you remember SARS was very much in Asia mostly. MERS was a Middle Eastern, I think. So that didn't really come into Asia. But SARS was the big one back in 2003. And so from the point of outbreak, this is 0 months before start outbreak, that was normality. And then suddenly it took a drastic hit. I don't know if you guys remember SARS, but I'm pretty sure I got SARS. I was in Vietnam at the time. There's a bit of an outbreak in my office, and I'm pretty sure I got it. But by the time I went to the hospital and got a test, the doctor was like, it doesn't matter. It's kind of the same as the flu anyway. Like, you'll be all right. Like, you may have had it, you may not have had it. It's kind of the same. So, and that was my experience. And I feel like it kind of blew over very quickly, SARS. Like, it kind of went away. Like, it didn't really linger. So that's the thing is, even with that happening, so let's say it took 3 months for it to kind of linger, and then it started just cooling down. The confidence came back, and at this point, if you look at it, it's really 6 or 7 months after that happened. So yeah, I mean, it's 6 or 7 months is like it's a long period for now, but it's, if you think about the impact of Corona being multi-country, multi-region, it's really affected everywhere, and every country is going to recover in a different way as well. So yeah, I mean, I think learning from this small impact, we can expect a very big impact from coronavirus. But fortunately, it isn't our first rodeo, and we've been through this before. If you kind of zoom out a little bit, it doesn't look that bad. Airline industry is pretty much growing like rapidly since the 70s. Suddenly we're just, yeah, boom, we're up here and complaining about it. So it's not all bad news, but the fact is the industry is now there and it now needs to be supported. It's not like you can just take away that money. Things will have to go away as well. So yeah, if you kind of look here, this is just very interesting. This is operating profits of global airlines. And you have losses in profits like Gulf War. I guess that probably like stopped a lot of travel. I can't remember, too young. 9/11, that certainly stopped a huge amount of international travel. And that actually, as I was doing my research for this, a lot of people still say that the airline industry has never properly recovered from 9/11. I mean, maybe that's just hype, but financially, it has taken a while, apparently. SARS was there, you see a little drop. So I wonder what, like, if you think about 9/11, what would coronavirus look like if that's 9/11, if that's SARS? How big would coronavirus be? Financial crisis 2008. Yeah, and that's kind of it. And this is where we should be now. So it's going to be very interesting to see how big this goes. And we just don't know like how long it's going to last. That's the biggest problem. And you just have everything grinding to a halt. All of these, like North America, the global in blue, that's the average. By the way, Brian Pierce has done some amazing research on this. Thought I'd give him credit. Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific, actually, I've noticed in multiple sources, is one of the most financially impacted in any market. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Europe also. Okay, so this is where it gets serious. So if you look at this graph, and the yellow bits are the medians. What is this called? A plot and scatter graph or something like that. I did this in school. I remember it. Minimum and maximum. Minimum, maximum. So whoops. So if you kind of average it across, it's about 2 months. 2 months runway is the average runway a airline has. Thank you, Brian, for working that out. So, but you've got some airlines, like you've got a lot in Asia Pacific. The maximum is 9 point something. Middle East, they've got a lot of cash. North America, the maximum is just over 4. That's like, imagine North America, that includes American Airlines. It includes all of the big players, like the biggest airlines in the world. So yeah, it's really, it's quite dramatic to see that, because if you look at the time that SARS took to recover, which was 6 months, and then you look at the runway that an airline has, which is 2 months, and then you say, what's Corona going to be 12 months, hypothetically? I have no idea. I can't forecast that. But let's say it's 12, that's really going to create a lot of damage. It's not just airlines that are damaged as well, it's countries. Countries are heavily dependent on tourism. If you look, like Thailand is one of the most impacted. 22% of their GDP goes to tourism. Like massive amounts of money are being lost. Well, they're not being shared or spent or spread or whatever you want to call it. So it's just, I can't even imagine. Many of these countries are not really modern economies, right? You've got a lot of emerging markets here, like China's quite mature, Turkey's quite mature, but there's a lot of ecosystems that are on a fine balance. they may falter as a result of this, and this is where the fear of countries collapsing comes into play. But yeah, I don't want to go too much into that. There's literally been trillions of dollars lost in tourism. So yeah, and you can see here again as well, you've got this like 2003, not much loss from SARS, 2009, global economic crisis, a little bit. This is in billions. And then they are predicting that it's going to drop dramatically as a result of this COVID-19, 450 billion. And this is in export receipts. And there's a much bigger amount lost in exports. So jobs, massive jobs that support the air transport industry. Asia Pacific is so many jobs. I don't know why. I can't explain why they have so many jobs impacted by this, but it's super dramatic. Europe next, Latin America, North America, Africa, Middle East. Yeah. So they are doing some predictions. So these guys at this organization, they have predicted two different models. They've predicted a V shape and a U shape, and you'll probably hear this terminology a lot as we have to have different models to play with, right, to predict outcomes. So this is really looking, if you look at this, we're in April now, and this is assuming that there is some kind of comeback. So baseline is the hypothetical scenario had in black, had nothing happened. Scenario 1, V-shaped, quick recovery from May 2020, U-shaped, prolonged contraction to June 2020. And this is in passenger numbers. So that's really what, worst case, what we've got to expect is just continued nothing. Hopefully, we will start to see a rise. And I guess that's really the big question, the million-dollar question. So some of the impacts, customers cancel in droves, and airlines are being forced to pay back. So this is, I mean, I can't say whether this is right or wrong. The consumers are required to receive refunds, and I mean, there's obviously particulars, and it's government by government, but on the left is an order from the US government to say all airlines have to give refunds. Yeah, and this is a major, it's also a cash out, remember, so that's the consideration. You've got companies like Air France. They announced on April 11th they're losing 25 million euros per day, just keeping open. Virgin Australia, this was April 9th. They've really cut down their flights, and they are really like, we need a bailout or we probably won't be around. So it's now becoming a very interesting question mark. Should the government bail out Virgin? If they don't, then will that leave a monopoly, with Qantas only? So really interesting questions. Really interesting. Airlines take drastic action to cut costs. So we can see all sorts of very immediate changes. These women look very happy, but they haven't had their meal or their drink. They're actually being shown it. I think that's the wrong picture. But yeah, so there's all sorts of measures that are being taken. In-flight Wi-Fi is another thing. It has a fixed cost per airline. So if you turn it off, there's no cost for that airline, or it's lower cost. And that's to guarantee bandwidth. So those kind of things. There's also a pretty big PR risk, and unfortunately Qantas are going through this at the moment, and they've been doing a really great job of like flying people home, and I can't really comment on them as a business, but they have had staff getting sick. There's been allegations of staff not being given protective gear, staff not being allowed to quarantine or told to quarantine, which is, it's kind of like if they've done a Mercy flight and then they just go into another flight, that's, yeah. So those kind of things, it's a big PR crisis for airlines as they venture or kind of manage this half in, half out scenario of, yes, we're still operating, but yeah, I mean, if you operate, you've got to take different measures, I guess. Another big thing is no new planes. As Drake would say, no new planes. So EasyJet, they have just paused their orders, um, and with Airbus, and so they paused the orders. Oh, that sorry, the founder is suing EasyJet executives because they haven't paused the orders, and now they're pausing it. Um, yeah, so very like dramatic. Like the founder's suing the company that he owns because he's like, you're not taking the right action. He claims that it is misuse of taxpayer money to continue with that order of new planes, right? Obviously. And it's a misuse because we're about to get a bailout from the government. And as that happens, EasyJet also secured a 600 million euro government loan, which is good. I think that really helped them. But you can see the kind of drama that these companies are going through. They've got this existing order already for these manufacturers. They've got to get out of that. That's millions and millions of dollars. Like, it's amazing. So another thing that airlines are doing is they're retiring planes. And I'll talk about this in a second. There's a cost to maintain planes on the ground. So they're actually just retiring them early. If they were about to be retired, like Lufthansa, I'm not sure if I say that correctly, they are retiring a bunch of planes that were supposed to be retired in 2022. Just like, let's bring that forward. We're not going to use them. Save the money. American Airlines, they've actually retired both planes and people as well, like people that were about to take early retirement being asked to retire early. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Yeah, so this is the cost of keeping grounded planes healthy. This was actually an Air New Zealand flight technician. I actually almost studied to be a flight technician when I was in high school. Like I almost went to university on that path because I thought it was cool, but I decided not to. It wouldn't have been the right path for me, to be honest. So yeah, anyway, 400 hours per aircraft, long-term grounding of large planes. So that's to put a plane into storage. And so if you are half using it, like sometimes using it, you have to kind of rev the engines once a month. If you're not going to do that and you want to put long-term storage, you actually have to put different like coolant into the engines. It's like a long-term oil. It's very technical, but the fact is it takes money to do this and maintain them, even though they're not being used. So Boeing, Airbus, everyone is reeling from the effects of coronavirus. These guys are all downstream. I'll talk about the cash flow in a bit, but yeah, I mean, naturally these guys won't get the orders. We've talked about EasyJet. It's going to be like that with all of their customers. They produce some phenomenal amount of planes every month. It's like 50 planes a month or something like that. Like it's a lot of planes get produced every month by these companies. I don't know where they all go, but they go somewhere. Japan. Go Japan. So they have a very creative airport approach. I'm not sure if this is going to last very long, but what they've done is they've put like you get a cardboard box area and you have to stay in the airport for 48 hours under light while you get tested like positive or negative for corona. And then if you do get tested negative, then you can go into the city. So it's a really interesting thing. They're charging people for the cardboard box room, $140. So good idea to make some cash back. But that's the thing. You have to think about this is when it does reopen, like if we have testing, like fast testing, so you before you travel, you know that you don't have it. And then after you travel, before you arrive, you know that you don't have it. You know, if you can do that fast testing, then technically this kind of process could be a lot faster. Like you wouldn't have to wait 48 hours for you know, see your loved ones, like to go on holiday. At least it's not 14 days. So airports are heavily impacted as well. Airports are really another big impacted party, majorly impacted. Naturally, their revenues are all through flights coming in, people coming in, and now that's put on pause. It's going to wipe out half of airport revenues, according to this report. There's also other costs being an airline. So you wouldn't have thought it, but the way airports work is they allocate slots to different airlines. Maybe you would have thought it because you have terminals that are like Qantas terminal, and it's like all Qantas, and they really dominate that. And other airlines have kind of terminals that are very far away, and you have to really walk quite a way. These are all slots, and it's slot based, and it's a historic paradigm of the industry. So to maintain your slot, your rights, you have to maintain the flights that go there. If you're not using them, it's use it or lose it kind of thing. So a lot of airlines actually have to maintain a minimum number of flights, and there were ghost flights being done to just prevent the loss of these slots, which is crazy. Why would you fly just for a financial commercial idea? It's really a story. Also, air traffic control fees is another area where, yeah, you wouldn't have thought about it, but there's a whole ecosystem where they have to control and govern air traffic. And so they've done some great things by relaxing fees to airlines. But yeah, I mean, all of these things you wouldn't really expect in the ecosystem that airlines have to pay for. Governments propping up failing industries. Canada, Mr. Trudeau, Tito, as I like to call him, he is, yeah, he seems to have really helped out Air Canada and WestJet with the workers' wage subsidy, which is really cool. I mean, it's just good news for those airlines, for those human beings that work there. So that's good. However, I'm not sure if everyone on this call is aware of what a share buyback is or what it means, but basically share buybacks, it's a process where you actually spend the cash of the business to buy the stock back from the shareholders if it's publicly listed. So I'm buying it back. It reduces the amount of stock on the market. It increases my my earnings per share. So it actually increases the way my financials appear, my reporting appears. It also improves the executives' share value. So because the executives often have a lot of shares in the business as part of their package, by reducing the available amount of shares on the market, it increases the earnings per share, it increases the value of their current shareholdings. So it's really, it's something that has been talked about a lot recently, and there's been some crazy situations of this happening, and it was already in the news, and now that these airlines are asking for money from the government, it's like, wait, bro, what happened back there? Like, what happened before when you did that buyback? You spent all your cash. Oh, you don't have any runway. Oh, yeah. So that's the question now. I think the whole world is also going to hold some of these airlines accountable, some of these executives accountable. It's like, if you spent the cash of the business, like this headline, US Airlines spent 96% of free cash flow on buybacks. Wouldn't that have been handy now? And for what value did that add those buybacks? It actually prevented the reinvestment of that capital back into innovation, back into the employees. So yeah, it's a very hot topic, buybacks. And if governments do end up bailing them out, and I'm sure many will, because airlines are seen as infrastructure. You know, if there's no airline for a country, it can't really operate as a country. So that's really the problem, is that they're forced to do it. But if they do it, the question is, should they have conditions attached? And I can't say yes or no, is my opinion, but you know, I feel like it's fair. There's calls saying that airlines for many years have been flaunting all sorts of like environmental impact things and not agreeing to policies, and because they can't actually change their business structure because their margins are so paper thin. So that's really the problem, is prior to now, they were kind of opted out of sustainability. Generally, I'm not speaking for every airline, but generally it's like, there's only so much we can do, guys, without going under. So now that we've got a position to take control, people are asking, should we control also the amount of sustainability impact they should be having, now that we all very much care about it? Virgin Australia, yeah, this is, I mean, these guys are literally going to go under. Virgin Australia may not get a government bailout, but is considering other financial options to survive. $1.4 billion. So, yeah, I mean, it's just really tough. Like, imagine if the brand just ceased to exist. Great. Okay, so let's talk about the economics. And this is the part that now we've looked into all of those different impacts. There's so many, right? Like so many things. I could have kept going. Like there's so much detail in the airline impact on so many different people. So let's look at the macro view. And this is my own opinion and lens on how the current system works. I may have oversimplified some things, but let's give it a crack. So in the middle, we've got the traveler. So remember we said at the start, the traveler is the center of the ecosystem. So the traveler pays the tax down to the government. The traveler buys flights through an OTA or a travel agent, or they buy it through an airline directly, right? So that's a pretty common scenario. Buy your flight, the OTA or the agent buys the flight off the airline. The airline has to, well, the airline as an organization has employees it pays, it has shareholders that it gives dividends to, it has manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus, also has fuel providers as well. I haven't talked about fuel much, but fuel actually is at an all-time low at the moment. So it's a great time for airlines to travel, but they can't take advantage. So you've got this kind of scenario here where you've got this airline receiving this money and it's paying out money. It's also paying its tax money as well, like a good business, and it's paying fees to the airline and related things to facilitate that, like air traffic control and all of those things. The traveler also, as they kind of fly through, they also do make some payments to the airport. They buy things in the shop, they pay the travel fees, the visa fees, all of those kind of things. They're all part of this ecosystem. Like there's cash going everywhere, right? Except for back into the traveler. The traveler's the one spending it in this case. And then at the top, the traveler arrives at their destination and they've got tourism to spend money on, shopping, local transport, accommodation, F&B. So, like all of those things, the myriad of different downstream tourism sector type beneficiaries of this traveler's cash. So this is a very, I hope this makes sense. So let's talk about what's happening now. You can see a lot of red, and really the reason it's all red is because everything's stopped. There's no real money going anywhere. So let's go back to the traveler and start with her. So she, instead of paying the agent OTA, she's asking for cancellations. She's also calling the airline, cancel me, please, I want my money back. The airline agent is also having to cancel, so it's kind of the reverse flow of what it was before. It's like, I want my money back, I want to cancel. Naturally, at the top, travel restrictions. So she just can't travel to these places. She can't spend money in these places. So there's not really much to do. Maybe she can online shop, but she may as well do it globally, not in a specific country. Okay, so we've got this airline. So this airline has cancellations. They're receiving the cancellations. They've got employees that are stood down or quarantined or sick. Can you imagine that? You've got like many of them are stood down, furloughed, I think is the word they use, quarantined. So what if you are operating flights like Qantas doing mercy missions and bits and pieces? You need to stand your staff down that go on one of those flights for 14 days. Eventually, you're going to run out of staff to go on those flights, right? It's very inefficient to do 14 days on every flight. So, but they're there, they're stood down or quarantined or they're sick, which is the worst case. So that's really like the airline has got a few problems to deal with here. You've got a bunch of staff that have lost their jobs and unhappy faces. Shareholders, they don't get paid their dividends, probably not a biggie, but they're probably going to start pulling money out as well. So that's another concern, as they may lose hope in the airline industry and withdraw and look into other sectors that are booming at the moment. Hopefully not, though. They also sending cancellations down to the manufacturer. Manufacturer has their own supply chain, which is also massively impacted. I could do a whole talk on Boeing as a manufacturer. And finally, there's no demand on fuel. So there's going to be a surplus in fuel, which is good for the prices. So if you can travel, it's amazing. So we've also got the government down at the bottom, and the government is just kind of bailing everyone out. That's all they can do, really. Still taking the tax money of the traveler, though, but bailing everyone else out. So really, it's kind of a terrible situation for everyone. No one's really happy. Just a reminder that when we say the government is bailing out, it's actually the traveler that's bailing out. It's the traveler's hard-earned tax money that they paid for the last 25 years of their career that is now just going to save these companies. So that's the reality of this money situation. It's not a happy picture. Great. So on that note, doom and gloom. Let me switch over into a demo. So let's have a look and see what people are saying about the airline industry on Social Studio. Social Studio is a Salesforce product. It is a all-you-can-eat social media management tool. It does publishing, engagement, and analytics. We're mostly going to focus on analytics today. So if I can just kind of maybe give a little bit of a preface on how this is technically set up. So these are my topic profiles. A topic profile is a grouping of keywords, and I have them set up for all sorts of uses. I'm listening for my brand, competitors, etc., and COVID. But I've set one up specifically for the airline industry. So, and I've got a few things going on. I'll just show you one that I've set up for airlines. So this is actually comparing most of the major airlines around the world and really looking into what people are saying about them. And so it's as simple as this. You're looking for a contains keyword, Air New Zealand with no spaces, and Corona or and coronavirus or and Corona or COVID, excluding bear, because I don't want Corona bear. So it's pretty simple. But it allows us to really go deep. I've got this set up for airlines, like different airline brands, but also the airline industry. And listening in for general topics like borders closed, cash, cleaning, flight cancellations, grounded, jobs, staff health, etc. So this is what I'm about to show you, what those keywords all look like in social media. So bear with me, this is not like pre-recorded, anything could come up. Okay, great. So we're looking across the last 30 days and we're really zoned in on the airline industry. There's been 2.3 million mentions of the airline industry in total over the last 30 days. So it's quite a lot. If you look at where they are, mostly on Twitter, 1.9 million, 85%. YouTube next, and then there's a bunch of other things. Facebook is a common question. Facebook is a closed social network, so it's not really open for listening. But where the conversations are in the public social networks, sorry, I had a phone call. In the public social network, Twitter, so that's where everything is available, and you can think of it like a kind of a subset of the population. So if you've got, say, 100 people and 10 of them are on Twitter, you can kind of guess that maybe the 10 are similar to the rest. And then using that, you've got so much volume, you can analyze this data, and this data actually gives you a sense of what the whole world feels. Like it's really a macro, unfettered, unbiased view of what the world is saying about this crisis in relation to the airline industry. So very exciting, this data. There's so much, and we can study this for years and years to come. This is an event that happened, and this data is real. So I do love this stuff, if you didn't notice. So if we look down, countries, so US, naturally very big, although a small decline, whereas you've got countries like India, who are number 3. Unknown is actually Instagram. and it's a bit awkward, but unknown is just Instagram doesn't come through with a country attached in the API. So that's a limitation of Instagram. But yeah, so you've got these guys, just ignore those. India, UK, Canada, Nigeria, Malaysia, Australia down here, about number 6, 7, Kenya, Germany. Yeah, so very interesting. And you can kind of, you could start to make some assumptions about whether there's, an increase in things going on, issues, and you can actually drill into these. If you look in the top right, these are the top 50 keywords out of all 2.3 million mentions. So, ooh, parroted. Parroted, what is that word relating to? Is that a way you can give it to somebody? Parroted, when they parroted China's claim that, oh, okay, it's a Donald Trumpism, probably. There you go. Okay. So anyway, that's an interesting word that came out of this. Just bear with this a little bit. It takes a little while. It's a lot of mentions. You wouldn't normally use it for that much data, although you can, but it's very powerful. So I might just change this to influencer score. This shows me, it sorts it by the most influential person talking about that topic. So bear with me. Yeah, so we've got a Tarek, he's pretty influential. There's a lot going on about parroted, just waiting for the keywords to show. And I am going to just zoom out of here and just move on. Okay, we can see them here. Sorry about that. So what else have we got here? Corona pandemic confirmed, permitting claimed cases, cuts, person to person, president, airport, Guam, supplies, sentence. I wonder who's getting sentenced. I do want to drill into this. Let's just see if this works. Navy Secretary sought okay for $243,000 flight, a COVID-stricken ship after returning from Guam. Okay, interesting. All right, word cloud's not my friend today. I'm just gonna just move on then. All right, I probably just need to refresh my browser. So countries trend. Okay, so this is also really interesting. So if we look at the countries on the left, this shows us the countries over time. So yeah, okay, so you can see here, this is India. India actually had a lot of volume, and then they've reduced somewhat with the odd spike. What else have we got? If we take away India, Nigeria, a few little spikes of Nigeria. If we take Nigeria out, what's this blue? Malaysia. What I like to look for actually is there's cycles. It's quite interesting. I don't know exactly why this is. I'd have to do a bit of digging, but you can see Malaysia has, it's on a Wednesday, and then it's on a Tuesday, and then it's on a Tuesday. Then yeah, that's a very interesting pattern. Interested to see what that is. Australia in the yellow down below, you can't really see that. Not too bad. There's, it peaks at about 2,000 in a day on March 18th. Canada, UK. Yeah, so very interesting. What about China? China's also got a bit of a cycle going. Tuesday, Wednesday. It's very interesting. Japan. Yeah, so this is really like, with this kind of analysis, it's really good to just zoom in, and you can kind of filter out what you don't care about, what you do care about. You can zoom in. I'm not going to dare it again because it failed me twice. But it's probably just my browser's running a little bit slow. And there you go. Yep, it's definitely my browser. Yeah, so you can kind of zoom into each of these bubbles and understand what's going on. And there you go. I'm just going to refresh my browser while we're here. So that's the what it looks like. I just want to show you one more thing in this dashboard that's quite interesting. Global airline industry. Okay, great. I'll just scroll down a little bit further. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to track the changes to this over time. Yes, okay, down the bottom. Okay, this is what I want to look at is here are the different keyword groups. So we can actually see which is the dominating airline. It's just loading. And we can also see what the biggest challenges are for the industry. I'm just caught loading it, unfortunately. Okay, great. So 94,000 for AirAsia. So AirAsia, this is the dark blue. AirAsia is actually the biggest brand conversation, which is quite interesting. So they've got 40% of the share. KLM are next up, 14.6. Qantas, 11.5% of the total conversation around airlines. Lufthansa, still not saying that correctly. American Airlines, down at 10%. I would have expected a bit higher, actually, given the size. Philippine Airlines, 5.9%. So even other operators, Qatar Airways, often known as the #1, Emirates as well. So you can see the share of conversation per airline is quite different. Let's just zoom in to the other one, which is really looking at the industry challenges. So these are those keyword groups that I set up. Great, so we can see here that airport is the #1 topic that people are talking about. Travel restrictions, #2, 31.4. Airline, so airline as a topic is actually lower than airport, which is very interesting. Flight cancellation, 5.6. Jobs, border closed. Yeah, so very interesting. And grounded, finally. Yeah, so it's quite interesting once you define these metrics, and you can see here this is actually the change over time of these issues. So you can kind of zoom in and go, okay, let's take out some of this noise. We've got airport, travel restriction, jobs. I want to see jobs. And border closures, cash, cleaning. Cleaning is actually another interesting area. Okay, jobs had a big spike on March 24th. Let's take that out. Border closed around March 17th. There was a big spike, but then there's been succeeding border closure announcements. Grounded March 30th. And then cash. Look at this, on April 13th, there's a bit of a spike on cash. This is people talking about cash flow, cash in relation to airlines, aircraft, etc. Great, all right. Cool, and that's Social Studio. So let's just jump back across into the presentation. Excellent, all right. So just to summarize some of those challenges that we looked at, these are, for me, the top 8 challenges facing the airline industry. 1, travel restrictions. 2, cancellations. 3, grounded traffic. Grounded aircraft. 4, idle staff. 5, cash. 6, staff health. 7, cleaning. And 8, ecosystem impact. So, and I haven't really talked about cleaning so much, but this is really this is moving forward, something that we need to really focus on. It's something that airlines can master as well. So that's an opportunity for competitive advantage. So let's talk about our response. We have a 3-prong response. I don't know where adapt has gone, but there we go. Okay, so we've got a 3-prong approach to the COVID-19 response. It's a framework that we've been working on and evolving. It's very simple. Respond. What do you do first? How do you immediately respond? Adapt. How do you adapt your business so that it survives? And then thrive is how do you actually make a win out of this terrible situation? How do you evolve the business so that it becomes something maybe a bit different in the future that is very necessary So looking at these three as well, and just to group them, is it's really tactical on the left. These ones we have to be very fast with. Respond is like, I need to communicate, I need to stop flights, I need to cut costs, I need to do those things. Adapt is like, what do I need to do in the next 3 months? You know, like to really make sure that my staff are utilized, my assets are utilized, I've got cash. You know, that's less of the crisis, more of the managing the crisis. And then thrive is naturally, what are we going to do? So what I've done is, and I won't go through all of this, but I've pretty much just gone through each of those different challenges and said, for respond, this is the actions you should take. For adapt and for thrive. So for example, travel restrictions and respond, like keep informed, communicate with all stakeholders impacted. Follow government legislation would be my advice around cancellations. Grounded aircraft, low-cost storage, leasing, cargo, or retire planes. So those are some of the actions you can take. Idle staff, communicate, follow government advice, like do the right thing. We actually come back to this at the end. Cash, seek government aid, sell assets, reduce fixed costs, seek bank loans. Staff health, regular testing, PPE and quarantine protocol. Cleaning, apply rigor like never before. So this is really like where we have to do our due diligence. Economic impact, consider the downstream impact. Like, who are your stakeholders that are also gonna struggle, and are you dependent on them? Oh, still lost that. Adapt. Okay, adapt. Travel restrictions. So, okay, in terms of travel restrictions, now that we're out of the crisis, we're now, okay, we need to prepare for reopening, ad hoc routes, focus on domestic, where if it's assuming it's controlled domestically. So, yeah, that's really where it's going to be very agile, and we've got to be prepared. If it's time, it's time, because it takes time to get those flights back up and running. Cancellation. So re-engage those people. If you did the right thing when they first cancelled with you, that karma will come back, and those people remember, and they will also appreciate the impact on you. So re-engage them and future book revenues. Grounded aircraft, prepare for reopening route by route. Idle staff, repurpose staff, find other opportunities for them. Cash, sell future bookings. So this is really the key with cash, is sell, sell, sell. I know it's not a time to sell, but it kind of is if you can be pragmatic. Everyone understands the situation you're in. So I think if you get very creative, you can do something. Like, think like Elon Musk. Like, how would Elon Musk think if he had a airline, right? How did he launch his recent Cybertruck? He did a like $100 like deposit to buy, and then it's like you get in 3 years, and it's kind of like he's just managing it. Like, there's other ways of doing this than we thought. So I would encourage people to just think differently around how they're going to sell those future bookings. Staff health. So kind of moving beyond like being good at it is really thinking wider about your staff's overall welfare, their family's welfare, and the community's welfare. Like, be a bit bigger than your own airline. Cleaning. And this is actually a marketing opportunity, is to demonstrate cleanliness. And there's already airlines around the world doing this. Ecosystem impact. So as you're doing your cross-selling, being pragmatic, think about your downstream, help them and cross-sell them as well. You naturally cross-sell your downstream ecosystem anyway. It's just now as they really need your help as well, and you've got the audience. So this is your opportunity to do the right thing by your ecosystem. Okay, and then finally, thrive. So travel restrictions, stay agile. Cancellations, trust in karma, right? Like, use that loyalty that you earned. You invested so much in loyalty. Use it. This is the time that the karma comes back. Grounded aircraft. This is an exciting time. I would recommend thinking about marketplaces and applying that to the airline industry. The concept of a marketplace is it's all about distribution of value and assets where it wouldn't have been used. It's ineffective. Right now, you've got all these grounded planes. Is there another way of using those assets on a global level? Idle staff, reskill, redeploy. So yeah, it's as clear as that. Cash, new revenue streams, new ticket structures. Like, get a different way of selling what you do. Would be my advice around cash, because only then can you really sell it. What if you could sell a subscription to travel? Far out. You can. I'll trademark that or whatever. Good idea. So staff health. So robots and automation is the future of staff health, really. Like, let's say we cure coronavirus, but we need to protect ourselves for the next one. What if it's zombies next time, right? You don't want flight attendant zombies. So we really want to think about that future as going to robotic process automation, cleaning around touchless services. How can people interact with your experience without touching it? And also get robots to do the cleaning. It's so inefficient to have humans doing it. And finally, the ecosystem impact. It's also your responsibility to just give this life. Like, you bring the people in, you've got the audience. Just yeah, I think that will help everyone out because there's a lot of other people impacted. Okay, great. So I'm running out of time, but I'm just going to whiz through. It is a bit of a wake-up call, but it's also a massive opportunity if we grab it. So it's just about whether we take the risk or jump in. The Bain & Company did a study on the global financial crisis and really evaluated a large number of companies and found that some companies were winners, some were losers out of the crisis. And it's about whether they were able to change their business model and take advantage of the situation. There's some interesting stories around how businesses are redeploying skills, like Singapore Airlines are putting their staff into hospitals to help with care. Like, they kind of help people anyway in their jobs. It's kind of redistribution of that skill, and it's a greatly needed resource right now. You've got manufacturers that are putting their intelligence and applying it to ventilators and all of those medical equipment. Perfect. That's the right skill set to apply, and it's great use of that resource. You've got airlines that are exploring getting into cargo in a big way. Right now, cargo, because of this whole corona issue, has actually increased the price of transatlantic cargo costs by 3 times at least. So it's very dramatic. And if airlines on the left, this is Air Canada, they've just emptied out their cabins and they're just like, let's do cargo. I mean, you've got Amazon and all of these kind of things. You don't need the staff don't need to touch the packaging either. They don't need to get on and off the planes to go there. So it's a really good opportunity there. I think also new organizations will emerge. Alitalia, the Italian airline, it is moving into a state-owned model, which I suspect many countries will eventually take as it becomes very expensive to support. Yeah, there's ups and downs with state-owned organizations. I will leave that to another session. Airbus, so they're just shifting their focus. So maybe Airbus, imagine Boeing, like they had a bit of a bad rap with the MAX planes. And now if they can shift their focus to a different line of business and make heaps of revenue, why not? Yeah, so, you know, I would encourage, I've got this the wrong way around. I'd encourage you to think about your architecture in this time that you've got this downtime. So this is kind of what a typical airline would look like, where they've got access to a GDS and they manage their bookings, but everything else is largely manual with some automation around that. And this is really a future where you could go into a single view of a customer. So if you're interested to talk to me, let me know. All right. For those out there that are availing of the free Social Studio offered by Salesforce, AFDigital are coming to the party with a free implementation package as well. Great. So that's my webinar. I'm very sorry I have run out of time, but if there are any questions, I can address them very quickly. No questions. Cool. So I hope that was helpful. I hope the analysis sparked some thinking. It's our point of view, and it's also a point in time point of view. So I expect this topic to rapidly change, and I'd like to continue the conversation. So any feedback that you have around this, any thoughts or ideas, um, really love to hear them from anyone in the airline industry or impacted by this.